to in long-term care. People didn't feel comfortable with the term art. It meant something very different as far as their own ability to do it and participate and co-create. So, and then in the beginning, we just tried to replicate the story circles and trained individuals and organizations, started spreading it through as much as we could, expanding it across multiple care settings, expanding it out into the community beyond care settings, intergenerationally, all kinds of different uses of essentially improvisational story circles, using any form of expression people have that was inclusive of people with dementia. So now I think we're shifting into systems work, really at trying to see how, sort of like the conversation with those care communities, you know, that they're understaffed, what systems change has to happen for any kind of organization that serves older adults to open to creative expression and meaningful, purposeful engagement. That's a little bit of the summary there. Yeah.
So I met Anne as a grad student. I was a grad student in 2006 to 2008. And then I didn't know anything about dementia, the arts, nothing. So I started reading, and I read Anne's work, and I really want to study with her. So I didn't know her, she didn't know me. And at the GSA, Gerontological Society of America, I went to 3 or 4 of her sessions. And then at the end of that, I said, can I please intern with you? And she said, sure, you know, want to move to Milwaukee?
Yes, and always yes, and.
So I said, yeah, in the summer, I can move in the summer. And she put me in a nursing home to live there. And that was the great learning experience. In addition to connecting me with other people, letting me observe all kinds of time slips. And so that was the foundation of OMA. It's really the same philosophy, the same goals, but with visual arts, because my background is visual arts. So that's how we started that many years ago. And then since then, we've just continued crossing paths, including today.
Yeah, and I also and continuing to co-learn in the, you know, best possible ways of, you know, because it's been such an incredible joy to watch this field emerge and to you know, spread, and it continues to do that, and it's just, you know, learning from it at all moments, and always trying to, I think, pull together people in the field to imagine the next steps and where we can go from here. And it feels like that's a little bit of what we get to do today.
Right. So we prepared some questions in advance, but I'm going to, maybe Megan and Krista, who are here with us, can help monitor the chat in case there's some people that need to be, it's hard for me to talk and chat and all at the same time. So yeah, please help with the chat. Megan and Krista and Aaron on the call here all work together at Miami University Scripps Gerontology Center. So maybe before we go to the questions that we prepared, and maybe you want to elaborate more on your comment about sometimes the arts can be used to mask bad care. What can you elaborate on that?
I think that's yeah. I think it's kind of what it's true. All long-term care is understaffed. It's underpaid, and whenever people ask me, and I get asked a lot, where where should, what are the best care settings I need? My mom has dementia. Where should I go? What should I do? And I say, honestly, go to the place nearest you that you feel good about, because you have to be there. Because there's just not enough people, and there's, people are, even if they're really good, they're just overstressed. And the system itself, it's almost like the medical system itself, like doctors come into the field with the best intentions, and then they're restricted to 3 minutes of a conversation, and it's killing them. It's killing both sides, right? So I think there's a tremendous hunger within long-term care settings for meaning making, because meaning making, these kind of arts practices have a primary and secondary, or actually just relational impact. It benefits both sides of the care partnership. But that said, sometimes the structures are such that it can't take hold. And that's sort of the culture change work that has to happen at a systems level. Like, what has to crack open? What work do you have to do with administration, or to lock a program in to even have the impact that you want over time? And to be able to, TimeSlips has been approached by some long-term care communities for large amounts of money to be infused into their dementia care settings. And we've really wrestled with whether or not to do it, because the reputation of the companies are struggling, I'll put it that way. And so, are we going to help people feel good about coming in, only to then, we can't fix everything in the long-term care community. So there are things you can do, but you have to set up, I was really interested in what was said earlier about, knowing what you can do and doing sort of staff training and incorporating that as part of it. TimeSlips did creative community of care training, where you really are working with the staff at an oversight level to figure out, even just introducing in services about what is creative engagement, where does it fit, and infusing it into the organization in that way.
I think that kind of training, when we're doing training for the arts in order to start our program in that community, has a professional development value that goes beyond the arts programming. Because we found that after we train and how we have to provide choices, because they can make choices even though they have dementia, and if given enough time, given the structure and all of this, staff members then translate into giving choices in snacks, in clothing items in the morning. So that kind of autonomy and dignity can be transferred from the art beyond the art. So I think that's important to give that opportunity, especially if they are under trained and overworked. This is a chance for them to have a sense of professionalism about their work.
I would add that essentially all the core, that we have a slide in the TimeSlips training where it's like the principles of improvisational programming, the methods that are at the root of, a lot of community engaged arts programming and methods, and then person-centered care. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And so you're modeling person-centered care, and that in the original study, the big study that came out about TimeSlips in a 20 nursing home study with 10 control and 10 experiment, we didn't even observe the TimeSlip sessions. We just observed the behavior on the whole unit. And there was spillover effect in the way that the staff engaged with the residents on that Alzheimer's unit. So it's exactly what you're saying. You're modeling person-centered care in a way that nourishes beyond just that activity.
Right. And also, when they see, when they talk, if we talk about, we have to be promoting dignity and autonomy, and in the abstract, it's hard to understand what that really means behaviorally. But then when you apply that to an arts programming, suddenly all these abstract concepts become very tangible, very understandable. So it's a vehicle really for educating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I noticed somebody talking about, Beth, you're talking about home care. And I agree. It's like the things we're saying about staffing can translate into wherever a person is living. So if it's a home care or even a family caregiver, these tools can be modeled for the caregiver. The caregiver can be engaged. And I think, Beth, about memory cafes where the caregiver and the person with experiencing dementia is there together, and that the arts engagement is offered as a joint growth and learning and expressive opportunity, so that they're actually participating as peers rather than being separated into the hierarchy of care or health, and to be side by side and expressing in that way is really powerful for people who are locked into a hierarchy of care. Yeah.
That brings me to the question of about Penelope and Wendy's Neverland, how you are able to integrate not only across different hierarchy of care, but also people in the community and staff member. Maybe talk a little bit about that, because I don't know if everybody knows about those projects that you did.
Yeah. I think so. Penelope was an attempt to do one large, like a huge arts project, collaborating with an entire long-term care community. So for people who don't know, care communities often are separately budgeted and separately run. So the skilled care, the assisted living, independent living, adult day programs never collaborate. They're budgeted separately. Their staffing is separate. Sometimes they can like steal a staff member for an activity, but they're really run like separate fiefdoms. And what that separates people psychologically as well, and creates those sort of chasms of stigma between the levels of care. So doing a huge community engaged arts project where all of them could collaborate together was really powerful. And then also opening it up, because oftentimes long-term care communities, when they offer arts programming, it's for the resident. But, if it's really just something really interesting that's expressive and creative, it gives the family members something to do together, which they never get to do, or it gives the volunteers something to come in and operate as peer discovery. So it was just basically huge creative discovery process, a huge iterative devising program project for anyone. We called it the rolling snowball. We just sort of rolled in absolutely anybody who wanted to come in. And then Wendy's Neverland was that times 12 nursing homes across rural Kentucky. So Penelope was Homer's Odyssey, and Wendy's Neverland was taking apart Peter Pan. And we said, and this can hold for, you can do those kind of projects with home care in other settings as well. What if the programming is just so interesting that people are drawn to participate in it? They're sort of like, doesn't matter how old people are, what their capacities are. You're just adjustable to those differences. and you're welcoming and modeling welcoming in this radical way, so that you're turning these kind of stigmatized places into cultural centers that are really kind of radical spaces of meaning making.
Yeah, I was there as one of the audience, and it was great. The theater is the entire community, and then you walk around from different stations and different things happening. It's like immersive theater, really. It's a lot of fun, but it is also a lot of collaboration and a lot of work and over a long period of time. Would people feel What if people feel like daunted by something like that? They want to do something like that, but they figured, how do I even begin?
I mean, I'd put it back at you. I think people get scared by visual art when they're not visual artists. And I think you have a period of just, I don't know either. We're discovering there are no answers, that, you know, you always start at that place. And you demonstrate that a contribution, you're going to accept contributions from anyone, and it's going to shape the path of the project. So it's really just steady, durational, acceptance work. And you just do that over time. You can break things into segments and sections of the project. But the whole time you're working toward this big sharing out of something. And I think you do small sharing outs, and at any point you can quit if you run, you do small share outs, small share outs, small share outs, and then a big share out. And I also think that picking a goal that's impossible is the way that you get people interested. It tickles the curiosity of the human inside whatever machine, caring machine a person has become, so that you're like, oh, that's actually really interesting. I'm going to try that.
We use OMA to build community within this continuing care retirement community as well. So students come in, but we also work with independent living older adults who oftentimes don't want to have anything to do with the memory care side of the community because it's too close to home, it's too scary, and all of that. So we ask them to be volunteers. So it's no longer intergenerational, maybe, but it's intercognitive interaction. So they go through the training and then they sit as a volunteer, facilitating the process, and then eventually helping with the art show, testing the projects before it goes to the memory care to make sure that instructions are clear, the materials work. And then they have a volunteer job that turns them into a friend to the resident that they tend to reject beforehand. And then what happens after oftentimes is they go visit their friends even when there's no OMA going on. So then it becomes an hierarchy, care hierarchy, connections, community building that happens.
Yeah, I think you and I both worked in the college campus service learning model. And, still one of my favorite comments from one of my own university, we did pre and post, we both have done that, of attitude changes of the students. And one of my favorites was this student said, I didn't want to get out of bed this morning. I had a test. It's winter, just kind of bummed out. And then I thought, I get to work with people with dementia today. And it just cheered up my whole day. I'm like, when does that happen? So that you're allowed to feel that sense of purpose and shared joy and this effusiveness of just you as a human being coming into the room. People love just the essence of you being there. And that's not an acceptance that a lot of young people feel in a kind of a hyper competitive looksism social media world.
Yes, absolutely. I think it was before you came when I mentioned that students, what the question was, what benefits do people get from doing this, engaging in these kind of programming? And I said, students just become better humans, you know, because that's a chance for them to develop themselves and to be more open to people who are different from themselves. So
well, it reminds me of Liz Lerman's work when she talked about, you know, and it's a squishy word, but it's just, you feel loved, you know, and she talked about her dance students when she was rehearsing in a care setting, that because she didn't have any rehearsal space, that was it. And so the young people, in the presence of this kind of radical acceptance and fascination, they danced better, more authentically, more fully, more, you know, in that way. And this sort of gets to, I think, one of your questions about rigor and how you define it in this work. So yeah.
So that brings to one of the questions that we sort of prepared before. We talked about rigor and research as measure, as indicator of good quality intergenerational arts programming. And that was in the main room when we were talking about in general. And now when we're talking in this room, where I think because of both of our focus work is more on dementia, what would you say the criteria of good intergenerational arts programming when we're involving people living with dementia, in addition to rigor and research that we talked about in the main room? You're muted, Anne.
So there's a meeting next door, so sorry if there's any bleed of sound. I'm so interested to hear what the group says, because it's really hard. It's hard to kind of, it's a little know it when you feel it, but it's creating with high quality tools and framing of the experience, opportunities for self-expression that can be felt through whatever material emerges. I think there's a sense of attention to the detail of the work and a presentation of the work that follows. The excellence goes from the moment of invitation and conceptualizing the project all the way through to the attention that is paid to the viewer experience or people who are encountering the work when you present it. You never drop the sense of excellence all the way through. And people recognize themselves in it. To me, that's a big part of it. The material isn't transformed in some way that people don't recognize themselves or their participation as being meaningful as part of it. How about you? What do you think?
I like all the things that focus on that excellence, for high quality tools and framing, attention to detail, presentation, conceptualization, audience experience. All of that has to be attended to, and a sense of excellence has to be envisioned before you even start programming. So I think that's important. And when we talk in the main room about high quality material, that's just part of that. But like you said, we have a lot of people that with a lot of Jessica from Covia, and a lot of people here, Kathy, and all kinds of experience with programming. Why don't we open the room now and talk to us? Unmute yourself, or if you prefer a chat, you could do that. How do you know when the program is good, and what do you prepare? What do you do in order to make that program excellent?
I want to jump in really quick and say one thing, because I'll forget it,
Okay.
which is it's not aping something. It's not imitating. It's not set up to be a bad imitation of something else. It is a wholly original expression, that you're creating opportunity for wholly original, authentic expression. And that's where the copying of things can be, that's where I think a lot of anxiety about art comes in, because it's like, oh, I can't make it look like something else.
Right.
So it's opening up, and that's what your work does so beautifully. It's expression without comparison to something else. It is wholly original.
Right, exactly. And when we're talking about this, I think maybe we should limit the scope to people living with dementia. Is that a good idea, Anne? So, because that's more challenging than older adults who can do a lot of things, right? So how do we define excellence, and how do we get there? Anybody who wants from the room? Okay, Ilyana? Yeah, raise your hand so that we can see and call on you.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
Hi, Ilyana. Yes,
Ilyana.
the question was about how we know, right? How you know an effectiveness of a program. I think that's what you.
Yeah.
I mentioned this in the chat. So I founded Stories Love Music, and we offer the joy of creative engagement for caregivers. And we did a pilot study with nurses at a hospital who care for their residents with dementia. And I would say it was in getting the data and the evaluation back from the people that took the program of how they felt in their job, how they felt on the job. I think just to go back to the systems that Anne mentioned, and being aware that those systems have to change in order to change the whole culture of care. So the nurses, the morale they described, just how the engagement that we taught them in the program was with themselves first, and that was holy, and that we teach that, as Anne said, is the holiest foundation, and will actually assure that people will go on and use the same creative tools with the people that they care for, but they have to experience it, I think, themselves. Otherwise, it becomes another heavy tool in their bag in an already sort of psychic burnout. So when we got the feedback that they felt changed themselves, and then that changed their viewpoint on how to use that engagement in very challenging, and they would cite really specific stories of very challenging moments with people with dementia, and how they utilized what we taught them, and how it changed the whole feel, lowered their anxiety in dealing with unpredictable behaviors. And so that was exciting for us to track that really powerful connection between how someone feels who's offering care and the care that they give. So we're really hoping at Stories Love Music to have a longer study, as Anne was saying, when you can track things over longer periods of time, as you say, control groups. And because my passion as executive director has been communicating with these administrators who don't often get it. And I enjoy spending time trying to tell them the value of it, but I'd rather be doing the programs than having to convince.
I just want to say that I put in the chat, I'm reading this book right now, which I'm like making my way through, that it's primarily looking at the perception of loneliness, which is a perceptive experience, and that the root of loneliness is a disconnection from self, and that the creative expression is first in the connective power of it is a connection with the self, which is what it feels like you're describing among the nurses, and the recognition of the power of that to then turn and invite another person into expression as a shared healing through the care process. So that double part there is really.
It's so, yeah, that is 1,000% it. Like the sacred part is the compassion of the shared loneliness, and the understanding that they, like that sort of vastness and that loneliness and the experience, that they understand that they could both be experiencing it, the carer and the cared for. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's part of the magic when you can shift that.
Anybody else? Lika, you have.
I don't see any hands. You can just unmute or you can put hand up.
Erin says, I feel like in order to create high quality art, you have to be able to remove self-consciousness and embrace mutual vulnerability between those making the art together. You have to be able to trust that the artistic process is playful and non-judgmental so that it can become experimental and create something new. Yeah, exactly. That's a great summary. And then I'll just say that there's a lot of back and forth in this field. And I saw a little bit of it in the chat but this is all about, and that's emphasizing the process. I think one of the things Lika and I kind of come together on is this balancing that you can't remove the product from the benefit. Particularly, I talk about people with dementia, anyone who's receiving like hyper receiving care has had removed the opportunity for them to be generous and to be part of the gift economy in the other direction. And so to have them be creators of something that they can put into the gift economy is a really empowering experience for people. And so the product to me, and I'd love to hear other people, is bound up in the excellence of the process.
I think if you have excellent process, the product sort of is a byproduct of that excellence is going to be excellent too. You know, that I don't think we should say, oh, we need to make something beautiful as a product, as the goal. The goal is to have beautiful process, but beautiful process sort of lends itself to beautiful product without trying. That's our experience. Cynthia?
I'm Pocahontas County Arts Council. I'm in a rural area in West Virginia, and we have a very small population. We did a really cool project over at our nursing home, and this was long before I heard anything about intergenerational or many of the subjects you guys are talking about. This is very fascinating for me. But we did a rock project. I just took rocks in, and they wheeled in as many people wanted to participate and let these people paint rocks. And because it was a rock and it was just colors, they didn't have any problem doing that. Whereas if I had taken in paper and paintbrushes and said, let's do a tree, it would have been stifling to them. But because it was rocks, oh, they had a good time. And then I got to display all of them on the outside of the building, which put that other dimension to it, that their work was on display for the rest of the community when they came and went from this facility. And that was, I think, one of the best projects we've done. And I just want to put my 2 cents worth in.
Thank you, Cynthia. I agree with that statement. If you say, let's draw a tree, and then you don't know what a tree looks like, or the tree doesn't look like a tree, and then you're disappointed. So absolutely, don't say, let's draw a tree. But on the other hand, if you see the backgrounds behind Krista and Amy and me, those are all paper. And these are by people living with dementia. And they're not intimidated by the material alone, but they're intimidated by, let's draw a tree or a house, or, so that's the instruction part that is intimidating.
I do wonder about that. I have a mother with dementia who at various times has tried projects. And I'm wondering if a non-representational one would work with her. something for us to try out here in our boonies.
Yeah, I think somebody in the main room said play, the importance of play, and that's
Yeah.
what actually goes in what's happening as the process.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to speak about what is constitute an excellent, or Anne, do you want to respond?
I wonder about, I want to understand, Jessica, in adding that quotation, if, because part of that can mean that creativity, that the product doesn't matter. And so I just wonder how you perceive Jean's quote.
Oh, that's great, because then you'd say aging doesn't matter too, right? In the same breath. I just added it in because I hold that quote close to my heart, because I think it's the redefining of like creativity, arts, redefining aging, longevity, the way we term things. That can be a hurdle for people to even get started in this kind of practice. So being able to redefine aging as a journey or creativity as the process, but I do think agreeing with Lika so much about when the process is working and it's magic, the product oftentimes, is enriched by that. It's like when they say, the ingredients is love in the cookie and you can taste the love. So I believe that, I love a good product, and walking into curating and executing a well-designed experience to have the outcome. But that's like, for me, I feel like I take that responsibility as like, the lead designer or the artistic director. Let me worry about that. You all worry about having a good time and playing. I guess that's kind of where I come from. What do you think about that?
I might change. Creativity is a process. It's not static.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like product is such a loaded term there, that, we can keep working on things that are products, they're just being shared publicly with value, which is a stand-in for the person being shared publicly with value, not being hidden, not, not being shared in a way that's devaluing, so that the product becomes a stand-in for the value that we take of the person themselves. It's a extension of the person. That's just kind of what I was gonna say.
I think that's great point, man, about the product being the extension of the person. When we do an art show, we take everybody has to contribute. Yeah, I have at least one piece. But we reject some pieces. We take their best pieces. And the ones we reject is not an indicator of it wasn't a good day, or the volunteer didn't do a good job, or any of that. The ones we reject because we don't, because there's a better one by that person, first of all. But also because we don't want to communicate the deficits. Not that we want to hide it, but we don't want to highlight it either. We highlight the strength, what they can do, the beautiful things they can create. And then other days, that's the same with regular people without dementia. We don't produce masterpieces every time we create something. So we throw away a lot of stuff. So they can throw away a lot of stuff. It's just that the throwaway part is a way of not showing this unfinished work, because we don't want them to be judged by that unfinished work. So that the product is part of the communication of who they are and what they're capable of. Phil? Go ahead, Phil.
Hi. So the process you just described is an artistic process. It's called curation. And so I've been an arts administrator and a program director in Brooklyn, New York for a couple decades now, working both for senior programming and school-based programming. And for me, working with teaching artists, the standard has always been, is this how artists work? Are we giving the students, the learners, the opportunity to think and work like artists? And can we, through the whole process? Now we can slow down some of the process. We can give specific instruction and certain tools and techniques and strategies, and hopefully have multiple processes working towards one particular product. But and so I think in terms of this discussion of process versus product has been something we've been having as administrators and educators for a long time. And I think it comes down to, in hearing a little bit about some of the experiences today, people who are have not been through the process only see product or see product first. I'm sorry, I don't know why I have a phone call coming in now. So people who have a limited experience making art only think of art as a product. They only think of art as the fine. So that's what's preeminent in their mind when you talk about art making. Whereas those of us who are artists who do it regularly really want to live in the process, and that because the process can take so many different ways, and it can lead to inspiration so I think but I've always said a product is whatever that means, whether it means a painting or a performance or something. That is something that artists have to do. If artists don't produce a product, then they're not getting the feedback. They're not getting that involvement. So yeah. So in terms of I think allowing what and I liked what Anne said in terms of like having mini sharings or mini opportunities. So it's a scaffolded experience for the participants at whatever their capacity is, so that they become the more confident they are in the process, I think the more confident they'll be with their final product. So thanks.
Thank you, Phil. Agreed. It's, like Anne's definition, art is creating something new that is of value. Mm-hmm. So of value to whom? There is always somebody out there that you are engaging with, whatever your art form is. So how do you engage? It's your product that engages with others. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say is, first of all, Jean Cullen and Rollo May say it's art is adding something new that has value to the world. But Suzanne Lacy, as an artist of human connection and sort of human relationship, you can choose where your product is. Like if you're working solely in relationship as your medium, which you can do, how do you capture it?
Yeah.
Suzanne Lacy does these ephemeral experiences and then photographs them. And, her whole retrospective at the Tate is photographs of work that disappeared, so what the product looks like can be very different. You can get really creative about how you capture the impact and what the product is. I'm really fascinated, Lika, by the question that we had when we did our little pre-session about dreaming of the future of this field, because there's people here who've been doing such great work, and it's such an incredible moment right now with the emergence of I was half expecting people to mention earlier social prescribing. I don't know if they did yesterday, but there's this real, it's really emergent, and it's happening, and it's of such promise. And I think the framing of dementia as a disability to be lived with until the end of life. And even a lot of the work being done in hospice and creative engagement, all the way, like where you're measuring the impact not on in health change, but of human connectivity and meaning and purpose. That's radical stuff, that we're in a whole new moment. And I just wonder about people's vision and dream of what they see in the future. And I'd love to start with you, Lika.
I think, the arts, back to the cave time, when we're making art in the cave, it's a central part of our life. And when we were small, it's a central part of our life, but then somehow it just gets sidelined. It's when we become grown-ups, and then when we're sick and develop dementia, it's even more sidelined. So a ideal future for me, art occupies the center just like everything else. Just, it's part of life. It's normal for everybody to engage in the arts, whatever form, but it's not like you have to become an expert, you have to take classes, you have to be special to do it, you have to be talented. It's just part of everyday life. Like some traditional societies, and they make up songs as they cut the paddy down, and just part of everyday life. That's an ideal future for me. How about other people?
Nobody here has thought about the future.
How about you, Anne? You answer first, and then other people can chime in.
I just gave a talk, and I have this Venn diagram with like 3 circles in a Venn diagram. And one is health services, and one is social services, and one is arts and culture. And there's this little overlap in the middle. And I think my fantasy is that overlap in the middle just becomes like the 3 together, which, we do kind of fantasize about cultures that do that already, and part of the PhD in theater was studying shamanistic, ritual, anthropological cultures in which that is the case. So, I come by my love of ritual, honestly, in that way. But I think that's, to me, if you go in and we're really taking seriously the social determinants of health, and an older adult gets their annual well check for Medicare or Medicaid, and if they're checked off on the loneliness, vulnerability, depression, could use reconnecting with themselves and other people, that they get sent to a link worker of some sort, who then, their funding for the services follows them to a community program in which these programs are offered, and that the health sector and social service sector acknowledge the integral benefit of a creative expression for belonging and a sense of social connectedness and purpose. They get to the local art center, and that local art center, the integration doesn't stop there. It's like, one nation, one project's fantasy of artists and residents in every community health center. Why stop there? Artists and residents serving. Beth Salzberg and I are working on a team that's trying to expand memory cafes and linking them with teaching artists in a national network. There's no reason we can't do that. Truly, that's sort of where I am. Giddy, as usual.
You both make me so giddy, I just appreciate everyone's time today and being able to gather like this. It makes me excited, for the future, to have like a 3-day Creative Aging Institute, happening virtually. It's like, bravo, pairing, you know, the loneliness epidemic with social prescription. I mean, the need for artists to engage and to have work with the rising need in the, you know, aging field. It's all, we're primed, we're here. I'm actually taking off, can't come back to the main session because I'm starting to modify my training for CNAs. That's what I'm going to be doing for the next 2 years and creating an online toolkit. So I'm super nervous and excited about it because they have like 2 seconds to consume, you know, some information. So that'll be a great challenge. But just again, I know I speak for all of us here. It's just you two are just incredible. And it's just great to see everybody's smiling faces. Mwah!
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Anne, for joining us. We have to report back. What do we want to say and who wants to do it? Anybody want to volunteer to report back, capturing what we talk about in this hour? No volunteers.
Yeah. You're
It's
stuck, Lika.
like teaching class. Anyone?
I could send a note to my 2 o'clock saying that I could be a little late. Just need to go through the chat.
Are you volunteering, Jessica, or?
I can. I've been listening, so I'm sure I can tell people what I heard.
Okay, well, if you can do that, that would be great.
Yeah, it's outside voice, yeah.
Okay, good. Anybody else? So you don't need any help from us, right? You got notes and everything.
I got notes.
Good.
Yeah.
So we have about 30 seconds left. Anybody dying to say something? Go ahead and unmute.
I just want to say
Yes.
it's kind of surreal for me to see both Lika and Anne speaking. My little backstory is I started with TimeSlips and then I worked with Lika, and so it's kind of full circle and really cool to see this. So thank you both so much.
Thank you, Megan. Somebody else was starting to speak?
Yes. I'm Charlene Potter, and I've been studying petroglyphs. So when you mentioned that, and I'm trying to search for how that ancient art can connect us today. Oh, looks like we have to go.
Yeah.
I think it's called graffiti.
Very, very old graffiti. Yes.
Thanks,
you all.
everybody.
Thank you, Anne, for joining us. A lot more interesting, the two of us, than me alone. So, thanks, everybody, and see you on the other side.